which would be something new in this country.
Well, I know what you're going to say is the Democrats didn't do that, but you go ahead now.
All right. I want to run through our governors at the moment and see who is one, who is not, and who is too close to call. Too close to call are Mario Cuomo and George Pataki in New York. Too close to call. In Texas, Ann Richards and George W. Bush, the former president's son, still locked in nearly a tie. Too close to call. In Florida, the same thing with the other Bush boy. Lawton Chiles, the governor, and Jeb Bush, the second son, both locked in a near tie in Florida. In Georgia, Governor Zell Miller and Guy Milner competing for the governorship. Too close. We can't call it. In Pennsylvania, here's a new call. In Pennsylvania, in the race for governor, we are calling Tom Ridge, the Republican, as the winner. Tom Ridge, the Republican, in Pennsylvania. In Illinois, we've already called this once, I'll call it again. For governor in Illinois, Jim Edgar, the Republican. In Connecticut, this is a new one you haven't heard before, or I haven't anyway. John Rowland, the Republican, we call as the newly elected governor. In Massachusetts, William Well, the incumbent governor, we've already called that. He is a prospect for president sometime in the future, his followers believe. We call him as the winner in Massachusetts. In Maine, too close to call, Joseph Brennan and Angus King. Too close, we can't call it. In Maryland, we can't call this either. Paris Glendening, the Democrat, and Ellen Sauerbrey, the Republican. Too close. And in New Mexico, this is a new call and a switch from the Democrats to the Republican. The winner is Gary Johnson, the Republican, in New Mexico. Peter?
David, in the various parts of the country tonight, there will be various different things that have motivated people to vote, or in some cases to stay home. We'll get to voter turnout in a little while. But in very general terms, we want to go first to Lynn Scher, who watches our exit polls for us. Anything broad stroke that's driving the electorate today?
Yes, indeed there is, Peter. And the irony is that the Democrats are getting trounced by almost exactly the same issue that swept them into power 2 years ago. 2 years ago, people elected Bill Clinton largely because they wanted him to fix the economy. Today we have
his Virginia campaign headquarters tonight. He has vanquished a fellow Marine, Oliver North. There you can see the cheering. This was one of the most bitterly contested of the races. In the background on the large screen is Oliver North himself. And there, thanks to television, you can see both candidates in the same room.
Making excuses for Richards. She's approximately
let me say that you're not going to be able to pick up the
one of two, either Pennsylvania or Minnesota, or better, both.
Well, we have projected Montana, if that's any help to you.
Well, that'll help. Now we're down
Conrad
to 3.
Burns will be coming back for a second term, it does appear. But there are some members of your own party who are wondering if there's a strong political agenda that they have to pursue, and they only have 2 years in which to do it, possibly. They can't have you running off to New Hampshire and Iowa and a lot of other places. You're going to have to stay at home and do your homework.
Well, I think if that's a real problem, we can address it. But I've been used to doing my homework and still doing a lot across the country. We've been in about 500 events the last 2 years in 47 states. So I know what hard work is, but we are going to have a responsibility, no doubt about it. The American people have spoken. I think they said GOP means change. They expect us to be responsible. We will be. We'll work with the president where we can. But we don't have the majority yet, so I don't want to be premature.
But if you get it, what is your #1 legislative priority?
Well, we haven't sorted that out. I've got to get together with all my new colleagues. We're electing a lot of new colleagues around, and Bob Dole is going to make that determination. It's going to be made with House members, with Newt Gingrich, with new senators, with the leadership, listening to the American people. We think we know. They want us to address Congress, I think, right up front. Let's see if we can't fix Congress. Maybe we can never do it perfectly. And then maybe welfare reform, go back and take a look at the crime bill, take a look at if the president's willing to scale down health care bill. But we know we have a responsibility. We're willing to assume that burden, and we've had an opportunity to do that in the past. We had control, as you know, the Senate 6 years in the Reagan administration. Right. In fact, I talked to Mrs. Reagan tonight and told her that thanks to the foundation President Reagan had laid, we might be back in the majority.
All right. Thanks very much, Senator Bob Dole. Those breakfasts that you have for reporters occasionally will be a lot more crowded now. Let's go to Virginia and take a quick look at Oliver North, who is speaking to his supporters tonight. He, of course, is the loser there.
State assemblies,
comes as a big surprise to a lot of people.
Need people like you. These are the bodies that make the rules, that levy the burdens, and strip the blessed dignity of an honest...
This special Dateline is sponsored in part by Healthy Choice Dinners and Entrees. Eat what you like.
How does Healthy Choice keep...
I think they may get the 40 seats necessary to take control in the House. And at this moment, I don't think we can say they're wrong.
What happens if they end up with 38 seats?
Well, Congressman Newt Gingrich has been working the other side of the aisle. He thinks he has a few in his pocket, Democratic members who would vote for him as Speaker in return for, shall we say, services rendered. They might find a very beneficial subcommittee chairmanship, or be looked upon very favorably over the next 2 years.
All right, in another part of our election special central here, we have Gwen Ifill, who is a new member of NBC News. She comes to us from the New York Times. We call this the Eiffel Tower. She's up there with some political veterans who have been watching all of this and are going to help us during the course of this evening with some analysis of what's going on. Gwen, what are you hearing?
Well, Tom, I'm up here with Geraldine Ferraro, the former member of Congress, and Peggy Noonan, the former Bush aide and author, and Warren Rudman, who is a former member of the Senate, and we're all kind of dumbstruck by what's going on tonight. We've been talking a lot about what we think is happening with the Democrats and with the Republicans, and especially the surprise with Oliver North in Virginia. What we've been trying to figure out, though, is what happens, what goes on next.
Well, I'm fascinated by that because you have so much passion, don't you, this year? A medical director was saying to me there that when the black vote turned out in Pennsylvania, it's too close to call, didn't turn out in Michigan, lost. Are you going to be able to chart that for us pretty closely throughout the evening?
I think we will as time goes by, but one of the most interesting things I think we're looking at now is that this shift of historic proportions possibly is taking place in a year when there's no historically explainable reason. No war, no scandal, no recession. It's happening for reasons we can speculate. If you don't mind an early one, they don't like Bill Clinton.
No kidding. Okay. Let's take a look at the net gain board at the moment, because there it is for the moment. The Republicans want the Senate. They're very close. They're not close to the House yet, but moving in that direction. Now for the local politics, we give you to your local station. Stay with us.
ABC News coverage of the 94 vote continues. Once again, reporting from the ABC News Election Command Center in New York, Lynn Sherr.
Continuing now with our coverage of this 94 midterm election, the big story tonight, of course, has been the Senate. The Republicans needing 7 Republican seats switched over from the Democrats in order to take control. Right now, according to our projections, they have gained 7 seats. It does not mean they're in control because there are 2 races in Minnesota and Pennsylvania that are still too close to call, so they're in question. However, we are now going to go through the list and show you as many of these Senate races that we have already, in which we've already projected winners. In Arizona, John Kyle takes over the open seat after Senator DeConcini, the Democrat, has retired. In Connecticut, Senator Joseph Lieberman, the Democrat, an easy winner. In Delaware, Senator William Roth, the Republican, retains his seat, also not much of a challenge from Charles Oberle, the Democrat. In Florida, Senator Connie Mack returns to his seat, defeating Hugh Rodham, the brother of Hillary Rodham Clinton. Senator Mack winning quite easily. In Indiana, Senator Richard Lugar, an easy winner as well. He will become chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee if the Republicans take control. In Maine, Republican Congresswoman Olympia Snowe has taken over the seat, an open seat vacated by Senator George Mitchell, who's retiring. This was a big win for the Republicans, and they were counting on this state. In Maryland, Senator Paul Sarbanes, the incumbent, will go back to the Senate. In Massachusetts, Senator Edward Kennedy, after a very bitter race against Mitt Romney, the Republican, Senator Kennedy continues his 32-year run in the Senate. He will go back to office there. In Michigan, a turnover. Spencer Abraham, who used to work with Vice President Dan Quayle, has been elected to the Senate. This is another turnover. This is the open seat from Don Regal, who is retiring, Democrat Don Regal. In Mississippi, Senator Trent Lott, the Republican, easily returning. In Missouri, John Ashcroft, the Republican, is winning an open seat vacated by Senator John Danforth, a Republican who's retiring, so that holds it for the Republicans. In Montana, Senator Conrad Burns, the incumbent, will go back to Washington. In Nebraska, Bob Kerrey, the Democrat, will also go back to Washington. Ran for president a couple of years ago. Maybe he'll do it again. In New Jersey, Senator Frank Lautenberg, the Democrat, the incumbent, returns to office, beating Chuck Haitayan, the Republican, a race marked by some very ugly campaigns. In New Mexico, Senator Jeff Bingaman, the Democrat, will go back to office. This will be his third Senate term, defeating Colin McMillan. In New York, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan goes back to Washington, defeated Bernadette Castro, one of the women running for the Senate. She was the heir to the convertible sofa fortune and the company, but did not make any inroads against Senator Moynihan.